Hello, Clarice. Can you believe it's been 25 years since this film came out? As you may recall, 5 years ago, I tackled the award winning flick known as The Silence of the Lambs. But this film had its anniversary before that, so I couldn't review it. But that's all changing now, 5 years later. So prepare yourselves, the cannibal is back. Here's my review of Hannibal. This is Big D's Entertainment Rankings and Reviews. So, greetings, my fellow YouTubers, and welcome again to Big D's Entertainment Rankings and Reviews. I'm the Big D, and this time around, I bring to you a review of the 2001 horror flick Hannibal, released by MGM along with Universal, co produced and directed by Ridley Scott from a screenplay by David Mamet and Steven Zaillian. Based on Thomas Harris's 1999 novel of the same name, serving as a sequel to The Silence of the Lambs, released a decade prior. Its plot follows disgraced FBI agent Clarice Starling as she attempts to apprehend the cannibalistic serial killer Hannibal Lecter before his surviving victim Mason Verger captures him. The film has Anthony Hopkins reprising his role as the titular character, while Julianne Moore replaces Jodie Foster as Starling. The film also stars Gary Oldman, who plays Verger, Ray Liotta, Frankie R. Faison, Giancarlo Giannini, and Francesca Neri. The film was released on this day, February 9th, 2001. Eventually became a big hit, being out even its predecessor, which, of course, as I've said, opened up a decade prior. Yes. It, but it got hated though by some reviews. It got generally negative reviews. But anyway, this film I'm gonna say is even more freakier, but it is inferior to its predecessor. Now, if you haven't seen my review of The Silence of the Lambs, I advise you to click on that before you go into this review, okay? So I'm going to give you a moment or so before I go into the story. Alright, let's get started. 10 years after the death of serial killer James Gumb and the escape of cannibalistic serial killer Hannibal Lecter, FBI Special Agent Clarice Starling is blamed for a botched drug raid that resulted in 5 deaths. This attracts the attention of Mason Verger, Lecter's only surviving victim. A wealthy child molester, Verger was paralyzed and disfigured by Lecter and has been scheming to torture and kill him ever since. Using his wealth and political influence, Verger has Starling reassigned to Lecter's case, hoping her involvement will draw out Lecter from hiding. He is aided by corrupt Justice Department official Paul Krendler, who is upset that Starling refused to sleep with him. After learning of Starling's disgrace, Lecter sends her a letter. He is hiding in Florence under the false identity of library curator Dr. Fell. A perfume expert identifies the fragrance on the letter, skin cream with unusual ingredients available in only a few shops. Krendler sexually propositions Starling again, implying that he can save her career, but she rebuffs him. Florentine policeman Ronaldo Pazzi questions Lecter about the death of Dr. Fell's predecessor. When Starling asks Pazzi for a local fragrance shop security footage, Pazzi realizes Dr. Fell is Lecter. To claim Verger's $3 million bounty for Lecter, Pazzi agrees to help Verger's men kidnap Lecter without police involvement. However, Lecter subdues Pazzi and forces him to confess. Lecter then disembowels Pazzi and hangs him from the balcony of the Palazzo Vecchio. Verger bribes Krendler to frame Starling for hiding evidence against Lecter, leading to her suspension. Lecter summons Starling to Washington Union Station where he encourages her to quit her job. However, Verger's men trail Starling and capture Lecter. Starling infiltrates Verger's estate, where she learns that Verger intends to feed Lecter alive to a herd of purpose bred giant forest hogs. She frees Lecter from the boar pen, but a guard shoots her. The boars devour the guards, but ignore Lecter. Verger orders Cordell, his physician, to shoot Lecter, but Lecter offers to take the blame if Cordell kills Verger instead. Cordell, who dislikes Verger, shoves him into the pen where the boars eat him alive. Lecter carries an unconscious Starling to safety. Now for the ending. As always, you know the procedure. You have 5 seconds to stop this video at once. Go to the description box below and fast forward to the time below. As I count down now, if you've seen this movie already, please continue. Okay, you've been warned. Starling awakens in Krendler's home wearing an unfamiliar cocktail dress. Although Lecter has sedated her and Krendler, she has the presence of mind to call the police. She then finds Lecter preparing an elegant dinner during which Krendler lobs miso- misogynistic insults at her. He then insults Lecter's cooking. Lecter opens Krendler's skull, removes part of his brain, sautés it, and feeds it to Krendler, although Lecter hopes to impress Starling by torturing her oppressor. She is horrified and attacks Lecter, but he overpowers and kisses her. She handcuffs their wrists together. Hearing the police arrive, Lecter raises a cleaver over her wrist, seemingly ready to maim her. However, the film cuts to Starling raising her hands, both intact, to meet the police. Off light, Lecter, his arm in a sling, shares a piece of Krendler's brain with a curious boy, saying it is important to try new things. End of story. So, what did I think of Hannibal? Now, I've seen this a few times, but let me tell you, this is really, really freaky and creepy and spine tingling and terrifying for a horror flick. Yeah, I gotta say, this is even more horrifying than even its predecessor, but it's nowhere as good as that, though. No, sir, and no, ma'am, either. Anyway, well, it's fine though. It does have several differences from the novel, but I can't really get onto those though. But anyway, Hannibal proved to be a big success and what have you. I'll get to in a little bit, but its reviews were mostly mixed to negative now, as of now. On Rotten Tomatoes, it sits at 39%, saying while superbly acted and stylishly filmed, the film lacks the character interaction between the two leads, which made the first movie so engrossing. Metacritic has a score of 57. Audiences surveyed by CinemaScore gave it a C+. Time magazine wrote a banquet of creepy, gory, or grotesque incidents is on display in the film, but this superior sequel has romance in its dark heart. Empire kind of was a little close to negative, giving this a mere 2 out of 5 stars, calling it laughable to just plain boring. The film is toothless to the end. David Thompson, writing in the British Film Institute magazine Sight and Sound, praised the film, saying it works, it's smart, good looking, sexy, fun, dirty, naughty, and knowing, and does make clear he is a great fan of director Ridley Scott's work, and adds, it is literally that Hannibal has become such a household joke that he can't be dreadful again. It seems clear that Anthony Hopkins and Scott saw that and planned accordingly. That's how the movie was saved. Variety said in its review that the film is not as good as The Silence of the Lambs, ultimately more shallow and crass at its heart than its predecessor. The film is nevertheless tantalizing, engrossing, and occasionally startling. Yeah, startling, you know. Roger Ebert gave this 2.5 stars out of 4 and described the film as a carnival geek show elevated in the direction of art. It never quite gets there, but it tries with every fiber of its craft to redeem its pulp origins. and we must give it credit for the courage of its depravity. And although he was left with admiration for Scott's craft of in pulling it off at all and making it watchable, and praised the Mason Verger character as a superb joining of skill and diabolical imagination, as well as Hopkins' performance as Lecter, which he described as fascinating every second he's on screen. He concluded, I cannot approve of the movie, not because of its violence, which belongs to the grand Guignol tradition, but because the underlying story lacks the fascination of Silence of the Lambs. Well, again, that's understandable and what have you. Eventually, the film eventually did well. In its opening weekend, it made 58 million. And at the time, this was the third biggest debut behind The Lost World, Jurassic Park, and Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace. And it went on to surpass Scream 3, which debuted a year prior, to have the highest debut in February. And that record would soon be surpassed by The Passion of the Christ 3 years later. And the film had the largest opening weekend for an R-rated film, surpassing Scary Movie, also from the previous year. Although Hannibal would be spoofed in its sequel later that same year. It would hold the record for 2 years until The Matrix Reloaded surpassed it 2 years later. Anyway, despite the mixed to negative response, the film went on to make 351 million worldwide on its $87 million budget, surpassing even its predecessor, The Silence of the Lambs. But anyway, yes. But however, after that, the film would go on to still be a big success. A year later, a prequel would follow in Red Dragon, with Anthony Hopkins once again playing his role as Lecter, which I'll be talking about that later on. Now, with Ridley Scott as the director, who of course has directed films like Alien and of course Blade Runner, Thelma and Louise, and well, this was after he did Gladiator, and later that same year he would direct the war film Black Hawk Down. But anyway, Scott's direction in this is fine and what have you, so he did pretty decent enough with this. Hans Zimmer did the score for the film, and I will give him credit for that. That was good and what have you. And I gotta say, very impressive. I mean, you can't go wrong with the stuff that Hans Zimmer gave. Especially, this wasn't the first time he worked with Ridley Scott. I know he's done scores for many other films he did. But yeah, even with its mixture of all sorts of other things like romance and retribution, punishment, and corruption, what have you, Hannibal feels like it's a mixed bag and all that jazz. Again, not as good as Silence of the Lambs, but it still manages to pull off a few good things, while some of it might be grotesque and what have you, but that's an understandable. For the cast, we have Sir Anthony Hopkins once again taking on the role of the titular character of Dr. Hannibal Lecter. Let me tell you, he's the one actor that really stood out in this film, definitely. Now, Julianne Moore, she does fine as Clarice Starling, but not as good as Jodie Foster, though. No. I like Jodie Foster's performance in Silence of the Lambs a whole lot more. That's all I'm saying about that. Gary Oldman played Mason Verger. Yeah, pretty good, but that character was really creepy and eerie looking and what have you. Really freaky. Ray Liotta played Paul Krendler. Not bad. Frankie R. Faison played the character of Barney Matthews. And Giancarlo Giannini played the role of Ronaldo Pazzi. And Pazzi, how you pronounce that? Francesca Neri played Allegra Pazzi. So So the cast isn't too bad. There's many others, but a lot of them are just some of those names I might have trouble pronouncing. But I'm just giving the main cast though. So the cast isn't completely bad, completely. But Hannibal can be a hit or miss or what have you. You be the judge. Would I recommend the film? Well, if you're a hardcore completionist, I would recommend you give this a one-time watch. If you're not satisfied with it, then just stick with Silence of the Lambs or maybe Red Dragon, which I will talk about that. Which even though this would be a new take on the film Manhunter, which I will possibly look into that and review that sooner or later. Okay, but I'll be talking about that later on when I get a chance. So, what did you think of Hannibal? Let me know in the comments section below. If you like this video, click the like button, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, and be a part of the Big D Nation. Continue to help support my channel. You know the rest. Next time, I'm going to be reviewing the film Just Go With It. So, if you like this, check out my reviews of some of these other films that Ridley Scott's done. You can check out my review of his second big film, but the film that really put him on the map big time, and that was Alien from 1979. Great horror flick that is. Or go to the upper right hand corner and you can see my review of his 2000 classic he did before Hannibal, and that's the Academy Award winning Gladiator. Or you can go to the bottom left hand corner and see my spoiler for review of one of his recent hit films, and that was Napoleon from 2023. Well, it may not have factually been that big a hit, but it still did okay. And the bottom right hand corner is the button you can click to subscribe if you like rankings and reviews on movies, TV, music, video games, etc. Then I'm your guy. Thanks for watching. Until next time, I'm the Big D saying, see ya.